Show of hands. How many people were here in 1969? Raise your hand. Here, on Earth, at any age. Raise your hand, damn it.
Earth 1 or 2?
Most of us in 1969 were young kids. And on a very particular and special day in '69, we sat by a radio and we listened to what? Neil Armstrong land on the moon. Oh, I can remember every second of that broadcast, as young as I was. And when he landed on the moon, he said, and everyone knows it, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And I thought to myself, what a bunch of trite crap. Meaningless. Meaningless. Means nothing. And then if you watch the tape, Neil Armstrong took a few steps on the moon. He looked up at the earth. And he said under his breath, and you can hear it on the tapes, just like drill. Just like drill. And I knew I was hearing something so significant. See, what Neil Armstrong had done is he had landed in his mind so many thousands of times on the moon, over and over and over again, that when he actually did it in real life, it was Old Homes Week. He'd been there before 1,000 times. The amazement to him was how much that mental simulation was like the real thing. And I realized at that moment in time, if you do it right in drill, you'll do it right in life. And I realized something else. If you do it wrong in drill, you will do it wrong in life. What's doing it wrong in drill? Worry. Worry is nothing but pre-played failure. Neil Armstrong pre-played success so many times that all the pressure of having the world watch him disappeared because it was just like drill. What a lesson on imagination. Last meeting, I brought Janet Werner to the podium. It had been 20 years. And for those who weren't there, 20 years ago, my old friend called me and said, I've had a spiritual awakening. I've had a spiritual experience, and I believe I can cure the mental health illnesses in this country. Does everyone remember around 20 years ago all the suicides at NYU alone? I can remember it like it was yesterday. Folks, think about it. Those kids who killed themselves, and there were many, would have been 40s today. Productive, brilliant, successful lives, and it all ended. And here came my old friend and said, I've had an experience, I have a toolkit, I can cure these kids, I can stop the suicides. Boy, I was excited. I got her up here and Janet Werner gave a brilliant speech. Went home, all excited, bubbling over with that spiritual awakening and the speech at the round table. She was walking on air. Her mother observed her. You see, she had a nervous breakdown in college. And to her mother, this spiritual awakening kind of looked like another nervous breakdown. She called the authorities, and in front of her family, took her away from her son, threw her in a cell in Bergen County Medical Health Center, stuck lithium down her throat, and when she told them, I just came from Wall Street, they wrote in her report, she has delusions of grandeur and is bipolar. No one ever checked with me if she ever gave that speech. No one thought there was any chance she was telling the truth. No one gave her any benefit of the doubt. And then she called me up from essentially prison. I was with my son in a resort in Pennsylvania at the time. I can remember this well. Hi, Janet. Been incarcerated for being mentally ill. What? What? And my initial reaction is, as you might imagine, I'll get those son of a bitches. Give me my lawyers. I'm going to send them down there. I'm going to bury these MFers, and I'm going to make them sit in their own fecal matter and drop. I mean, I was spewing all over the place. And then I had my little moment. And I realized none of that was going to do any good. So I told Janet, as of now, you're making a movie. As of now, you are a spy in the house of crazy. You're a spy. You have the training. Start taking notes. Start making your movie. Start making your docu-series. And Janet did it. She started critically looking at the treatment she was receiving and was fascinated how poor, ridiculous, stupid, mindless, worthless it actually was. And she knew she could do better. And last meeting, she stepped forward and spoke about the docu-series she was creating. And I told her, get it in the can. Get me a film. Get it done. I figured she'd have it ready a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later. I did not figure she'd have it ready 6 months later, but she did. Called Truth on Trial. It is a trial putting the medical health sector of America in a courtroom, and it is actually brilliantly done. Do we have a mental health issue in America today? Anyone? If you own a Tesla, you sure as hell know we do. I want to introduce someone who is going to change the world. Janet Werner.
Only if you help me. Only if he helps me. When we first met this morning, I said, we do not know what we're doing. I am not a film person. My background is corporate consulting, executive coaching, teacher. My partner, Dr. Chatlos, is joining me here today, and he'll share a little bit about what he's doing. But I did fall into this gotta make a movie thing back 20 years ago. So it's my anniversary this year. 20 years ago, in June, I was up at the round table. And it's significant because that's when we said, we need to make a movie. I don't want to go to court. I have an article here of a very brave woman, Mary Fulop from Alaska. She is in court this year representing herself for the very specific agenda I went through. There are a lot of court cases in the mental health system, but she had a spiritual experience. And she was misdiagnosed and mistreated, probably worse than I was. But she's brave enough to go to court. I maybe am brave enough to go into the film industry. But what we'd like to do is show you a 16-minute clip of a video, and if you want to share those pages. I am so grateful that we have a partner, Alex, who joined us in making this. This is still in development. It will probably be a longer film with an epilogue, but you'll get a feel for the story. And we'd like you to write some notes down so that we can get feedback. This is the first time publicly we're going to be doing it. And this is really a precursor to our docuseries. We go 50 years of how did the mental health system get this messed up, but then what are we doing about it? The docuseries, we want to show hope. We don't want to just complain about the system. And then the feature movie we're working on is a full court case called Calling God to the Witness Stand. So we'll talk about that. So we'll see just a little bit of this, and then we'll bring Dr. Chatlos on and talk about what we're doing boots on the ground in New Jersey, around the country, and around the world. And we'll invite you to join us in any number of activities to see if we can make something happen, something good happening. So, Truth on Trial. And the fun thing about this is because we've built collaborations around the world, a colleague from the United Kingdom came over last summer, and she is in law school. She also has lived experience of a father dying in the hospital from misdiagnosis. And she volunteered to be my lawyer in the movie, or in the Truth on Trial. So let's see what we put together.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, imagine you were going about your days feeling happy, hopeful, and overwhelmed. But your family are looking at you through the lens of something that happened more than 20 years ago. They're looking at your behaviour like something's off. Without your knowledge, a call is made. That call results in 2 police officers coming to your door where they're telling you that you're going to be going to a psychiatric institution where you'll be committed, diagnosed, and medicated against your will. You go willingly with the police. You've got nothing to hide. You've not committed a crime. Everything will be explained when you get there. When you arrive to that institution, you tell the doctors your story, but they're not listening. They're hearing you, but they're not listening. They meet you perhaps one time, and they've already decided that you've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. One time, and you've now got a psychiatric label that's stigmatizing. How would you feel?
We will prove beyond any reasonable doubt that this medical report is inaccurate and highly prejudicial, and that this woman was falsely diagnosed of a mental illness that was not present.
As of 2005, someone would have to be a danger to themselves, others, or property in order to be involuntarily committed.
So some examples of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are: everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. And everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression.
V6289, religious or spiritual problem. This category can be used when the focus of clinical attention is a religious or spiritual problem. There is a spiritual part of us, and it is often out of awareness, but it is often what drives who we are, what makes our direction in life, what makes our purpose, what makes our meaning. And we've identified a way to understand how this spiritual experience is organized psychologically, and we've developed methods that can actually speak to it, address it, and promote what we refer to as spiritual awakening. Anna Biltmore had a spiritual experience. Anna Biltmore did not have a bipolar disorder.
Anna had a spiritually transformative experience that had the opportunity to have been treated with no medication and not even needed a day in hospital. But Anna was on that hospital ward for 11 days, given a stigmatizing diagnosis of bipolar disorder, and treated with at least 3 different medications to show the world the importance of educating medical professionals on spiritually transformative experiences that are in the DSM. Psychiatrists can use this, they're not using it. Why are they not using it? This is a question we need to find out. Is it because it doesn't result in a medical bill? We've heard from Dr. Kavanagh that if you are correctly given the V code 6289, you could walk out of hospital in less than a day and be given a 0 medical bill. We need to question why that's not happening. Now it's up to us to decide Who are we going to put our trust in when we go through a period of crisis or pain and suffering?
I met Anna through a friend of mine that met her and asked if I would meet with Anna to discuss her life story.
Why would you trust her, given that she was actually put in a psychiatric institution and diagnosed with bipolar disorder?
So you learn to read people, you learn to know who's telling you the truth or not. And I didn't see anything that she was telling me that came from a dishonest person. I did hear somebody that needed help to try to tell her story. That I was getting.
And felt that she was directly in contact with Wall Street and had a big business. I understand you met Stephen Feldstein, who was Anna's sponsor on Wall Street.
When she said, I was just here in Wall Street, I just gave a presentation on mental health, they called her delusional with visions of grandeur. No one ever called me. No one ever contacted me. No one ever checked if she was telling the truth. So they sent her to Bergen Medical Center, they stuffed lithium down her throat. They were making her catatonic in a cage while she was trying to change the world.
Anna is you and me. Anna represents the thousands of people across the world who have been committed against their will, ignored, diagnosed, and medicated for telling the truth. What we are here to ask is how many people around the world have found themselves in Anna's shoes? How many people have gone through a spiritually transformative experience yet are being treated like criminals, maybe worse than criminals?
If this happened to you, it's happened to thousands of others, not hundreds, thousands, and perhaps more than that. You're the one who's going to stop this from happening again. From now on, you are a spy in the house of crazy.
She did not have her day in hospital court in 2005 as required by law, but she is having her day in court now, not just for herself, but for all of the innocent victims who had their rights taken away from them with forced medication and institutionalized against their will.
How do you know who is sane and who is insane? Why do so many who experience manic also talk of God so intimately? Did you ever consider that manic was close to the experience of spiritual attunement? What if you found yourself opening up to a beautiful spiritual experience only to be locked away and labeled crazy? This true story is replicated around the globe for thousands of years.
I was hospitalized 6 times involuntarily against my will. Smacked the label of bipolar 1 on me, which led to all sorts of trauma and pain. And when I was hospitalized, there was very little to no exploration of the spiritual dimensions of my experience. Initially, I was diagnosed with substance-induced psychosis, then schizoaffective, then bipolar 1, then bipolar 2, and then I just stopped paying attention to the labels.
And so when I came back into the hospital, I received the worst treatment I could have ever received. I was over-medicated. I had chemical restraints. So they poured all sorts of drugs into me. I couldn't tell up or down, night or day. We're not even people.
Have I gone to court? Yes, I've gone to court. I've gone to court starting in 2019. I'm waiting for a hearing date in the district court to hear the motion for reconsideration. And I'm waiting for SCOTUS to determine if they will hear my state asylum case.
I know not everybody's going to believe this, but I know that I ended up in the hospital 3 separate times because of side effects from these meds.
They were just like, no, you're mentally ill for the rest of your life. I said, this has got to be wrong. I feel like the current paradigm denies anything soulistic. And it's time for us to say, no, it's not enough. And frankly, it's, you know, if we want to get like constitutional about it, it is against, you know, I mean, people don't fight for their freedom of speech and freedom of religion enough.
I kind of see myself and others who have gone through similar experiences as urban shamans, because if you don't know, shamans are people in the tribe that have had altered experiences when they're usually very young.
Often when we think about altered states, people who are labeled with things like schizoaffective and schizophrenia, it's often as Malidoma Patrice, a shaman from South Africa, would refer to this as good news from another realm.
This case has put a spotlight on just how low the threshold can be to be committed to a psychiatric institution, diagnosed as mentally ill, and forcibly medicated.
The numbers of people getting forcibly hospitalized and forcibly treated has actually been rising dramatically for decades. In British Columbia, doubling. In Ontario, doubling. In California, 30-day detentions tripled. Child detainees tripled. In Colorado, doubling. Nevada, doubling. Indiana, doubling. Florida, doubling.
In order to involuntarily commit someone, which is a euphemism for psychiatric imprisonment, the state has to prove by clear and convincing evidence that as a result of mental illness, the person is a danger of serious harm to himself or themselves or others, or so disabled that they are unable to survive safely in freedom. And even if so, they have to prove that there's no less restrictive alternative.
When I was a teenager, I was in the mental health system several times. One of the main times was as a troubled college student. I was a working class kid going to Harvard. I encountered a lot of mental and emotional problems. I want people to know that, many of us have been through this, have been through these heavy duty labels. I used peer support, I used nutrition, exercise, spirituality, nature, counseling. I used all of these methods and many more for my own personal recovery. And it's an ongoing process. I think to be human, we are all wrestling with these overwhelming issues of being alive and existing. So we're all using all of these methods to be able to give back. I think that's the ultimate recovery, is to be able to help others.
We organized ourselves around a narrative that told us that the pathology of schizophrenia, the pathology of the causes of schizophrenia, the causes of depression, and really other disorders were due to chemical imbalances in the brain. And that's a story that tells you need to take your medication, and you need to take it forever, really, because you have to counterbalance this thing. And the tragedy is, it's not true.
49% of Americans have reported having a significant spiritual or religious experience that changed their worldview. Very often, they're very difficult to describe, and when you do try to describe these experiences, you cannot convey the actual experience.
I, like many other clients, I started thinking that I was crazy, and that's the problem, right? Because there's no venue of conversation, because this hasn't been normalized, because it isn't okay to talk about this topic. You start thinking there's something wrong with you, and I think that's the problem. Is that myself and many of my clients, because there isn't a welcoming conversation on this topic, you feel isolated, you feel alone, and you feel like you're crazy even without anybody telling you you're crazy.
Anna has brought this case so we can see she is just the tip of the iceberg here. There are thousands of people who have walked in Anna's shoes, who are being medicated, mistrusted, not honored, when they should be able to share what they're going through without fear of being branded ill, mentally ill, with a diagnosis that they will carry through to their lives. Medications they don't need that can also potentially harm them.
And I remember praying and calling out to God. I just said, take this pain away, take this fear away. I have no idea if I'm going to function
I'm Joshua Roberts, CEO of Inspired Mind Mental Health
literally, this is the moment.
Also a presenter with the nation's largest documentary
served on the corner temple.
Hi, my name is Carol.
This can happen to you and you and even you.
But are we going to put our hands in the lives of doctors, where we've seen what can happen to Anna Biltmore? Or are we going to put our trust into something bigger than ourselves? Perhaps we need to look at the US judicial court system for the answer to this. For it is in God that we trust. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
No, I won't shed thy tears, just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me, yeah. Stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? Oh, stand by me, yeah. Stand by me.
It's fun filming in Central Park. As we were finishing the day, this gentleman was singing, and it happens to be my song. And so he gave us permission to put it in. So we would really appreciate if you would write some notes now, or at least before you go, we'd like to take them. It would be our first feedback. But let's just hear some comments. And you can answer any, all, or a different question, or offer us questions. I am going to ask Alex to come up here with me for a moment. Alex has been a lifesaver. Thank you for introducing us, because Alex is taking footage that I've been shooting, for the last few years and piecing it together. And the other day, he was down at my house, and I said, well, why are you doing this? Why do you care? So I really want us to hear, what is Alex's reasoning? Because it's not just another job. He's already working 24/7. So why are you doing this? Why do you care? And even for the 20-somethings that, are walking through this kind of agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. So just quickly, Janet mentioned that we met at the last roundtable, and I think that's just a testimony to the roundtable. It really works. So we met through this networking event, and it's really been, if you've seen the end of Casablanca, this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, right? So I work with her on her editing and direction and things of that nature. Something that's so incredibly important to me as far as this project goes is it is incredibly timely, even though much of Janet's story takes place years behind, whether it's
20 and 45.
20 and that's an incredible amount, but these are still issues that we face in this country today. Not only in the country, but also around the world. We have people speaking from all over the world in this project. Something as well is just on a personal level, I know many people that have been diagnosed with separate mental illnesses, and being in the arts, being in film, and working with actors and people that are on the more artistic side of things, you tend to find people that have dealt with things like that. So separate mental illnesses that have been placed on these different medications. So it's a story that's near and dear to my heart on a personal level. And also Janet's story is just incredibly, once again, it's timely, it's touching, and it's an important story to get out there, especially because, once again, we have a mental health epidemic, especially in this country. But it doesn't seem to me that many people know how it happened, how it came to be. So if we can get experts and people on the stand and in our documentary and in our films to speak on that and to tell us how it happened, then maybe we're one step closer to figuring out how to fix it. And that's our goal.
So thank you. So we'd love to hear just some reactions, and definitely please write, whatever you can give us. Reactions to what you see. You know, to what extent is this different or new? I know you all know about challenges in the mental health industry, but we're promoting the spiritual part. It's kind of a hidden part in what we think is a hidden answer. Comments, reactions to what you saw. Is this familiar to you? Did you learn something new?
Yeah, I saw part of this before. What I'm wondering is, maybe you could explain, this is a very timely topic. Last year, as the New York Times or Wall Street Journal had a series on people involuntarily committed and how they were held at places because until their insurance ran out, every possible diagnosis. And this is, and there's also a book that came out, of autobiography, memoir called The Chair in the Valley. And it was did fairly well, but it was about a young man who was also committed. Even his parents, like, nobody could get him out for a very, very long time. And children, a lot of children are being held at mental health facilities. And it seems like you had that graph, and it seems like this would be, at the same time, the industry is being expanded, like chains, like there are mental health chains across the country. And some of them are more egregious about this than others. So given that situation, and a lot of these people maybe have just anxiety disorder,
yes,
they may have a large varieties of, opposition to authority, various things. Why are you focusing on the spiritual? Like, is it about how society and doctors react to people who have spiritual experiences, who manifest it in certain ways that people find threatening? Or is it the bigger, like, why wouldn't that be one component of the larger picture of the growing trend toward insurance benefits and incarceration of mental health patients?
That's a great question. I'll do a simple answer, and then I'll talk more in detail after. It's because the spiritual part is not being covered, and the elevation of incarceration and the over-medication is covered in a lot of documentaries and or on YouTube. They're covering that, and we have a lot of our team as advocates just on that. Nothing has been said about when you have a true spiritual experience, whether you're in South Africa or India or United States, it should not be immediately looked at, although it could look like it, that it's a manic moment. And there's a way, Dr. Chatlos will talk a little bit about how we can avoid the hospitalization. So we're doing it because nobody's covering it. And it's what I went through, and I was called to do this. I was 25 and I was 50, and I had a beautiful spiritual experience, and all of a sudden police are called and I'm carted off to a hospital. And I even brought the data in to the doctor. Here, this is what's in the DSM, and I was ignored. So I had to spend 11 days on meds, locked against my will, and it's the spiritual part that got me through it. I was sane for those 11 days. We talked on the phone all the time. So that's the short answer, that it's not being covered, and we're finding that in all these different cultures, there are cultures where they honor it, and we're gonna have that spoken into it, but a lot in the Western culture, it's not honored. So we're bringing that out. Other comments, we'll have to manage the time because I do want to do a few other things. Comments, reactions, is this new? Have you seen this before? Yes, Edward?
I talked to you at the last meeting, I talked to the doctor over here. These people have spiritual awakenings, but it manifests themselves in such a degree that some people think it's mental illness.
Yes.
How do you tell the difference?
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, come to our Dr. Town. You know what, could you just comment? Well, maybe, you know what, why don't you pick that up? Pick that up for the second piece. We are doing awareness orientations for doctors, nurses, mental health clinics to answer that question. There is a differential diagnosis that can take a good stab at making the difference. We also have research-based methodologies that just say, it's very simple, stop and talk. Before, unless the person's of harm to self or other, there's a chance to stop and talk and ask, is there something religious or spiritual going on? but nobody even knows to even ask that question. So I'll have Dr. Chatlos comment on that, but it's another part that's going to happen alongside the movies to train doctors, train nurses, train first responders. Any other comments? Yes.
What's an example of a spiritual experience?
For me, I actually had a Holy Spirit experience. It was total, full Christian, and it was an experience of, oh my God, I feel Jesus inside of me. And if I was in a Pentecostal church and I didn't speak in tongues, but I did, that would have been fine. But I had it first at 25 and again at 50. It was really like a heightened state of awareness. I could have looked like I was manic, but you know, it was, I fully understood it as a spiritual encounter. Yeah. But we'll have to go through the whole documentary to fully answer that as well. But thank you. Any other questions or comments? Should we do this movie? Will this get some legs? All right. Yes. The second part, we'll do the next few fairly quickly, but we want you to know this is more than a movie, it's a movement. And I'll ask Dr. Chatlos to come on up and talk about his work in sponsoring. We'll just pass these little brochures out so you can see some of his work. Dr. Chatlos is my business partner and also one of the major funders on our productions, and he will talk about our AWARE program.
Hi.
Got a microphone for you right here.
Clip it on my...
Perfect.
There we go. Good. Let me just briefly introduce myself. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm an adult, a child and adolescent, and an addiction psychiatrist. And I have had spiritual experiences. And I've also been treated for a mental disorder for 35 years and have a totally normal life, and they are different. And I have studied throughout my career, especially with working with addiction. Some of you may be familiar with the 12-step programs and the higher power as part of recovery. I've studied the nature of spiritual experience to the point, as you saw in the movie, we now have a language and an understanding of how it's organized. Well, part of why we do this is I've been speaking about spirituality for years, and it falls on deaf ears. Until we have an awareness that spiritual experiences are absolutely real, and now with the research with the psychedelics, it's a given. There is no question. There is a part of our brain I refer to as a spiritual core that's out of awareness, and it erupts as spiritual experiences that can get out of control. They can look psychotic. They look crazy, but they don't need medications. They are not dangerous. And so the number one goal of our effort is awareness. For people to, first of all, be aware spiritual experiences are real, and they can be harmed in the mental health system. Our second goal, and that's what this is, we have targeted New Jersey as a place to have a spiritual awakening, because that's the second half. Not only can they occur and be harmed and hurt, and it's tragic, we miss an opportunity for transformation. That we now have the ability to promote spiritual awakenings and have people integrate it into their life, and this is without medications, without psychedelics, and it is the most powerful healing I've seen in 45 years in my career. So at the end of my career, I'm more excited and happier in the work I do and what I see, because it's really what I went into psychiatry for. I believe that answers the questions.
We're founding the AWARE program.
Yes, what we founded is the AWARE. Are we aware of religious and spiritual experience, just to get people to recognize the reality of spiritual and religious experiences, and then the value, and how do we actually promote it? So that's what we're up to. I think that pretty
Yeah.
much explains.
Yes.
Okay.
And this sheet really gives you the rest of it's more than a movie, it's a movement. We do an Aware virtual that if anybody's interested, you're welcome to join us. The last 3 pieces that I'd like to share is part of the awakening, and you're welcome to take some samples of one of my creative moments. Part of an awakening as I got very creative, and I've created an intellectual property portfolio, of which Stephen has seen most of it. One of them is postcards from home. And we have napkin notes, we have books that are published and not published. So there's this whole section of we're looking for some support, some help on how do we launch intellectual property. So that's part of the movement. These cards are sent out to hospitals and mental health promotional initiatives to just offer some positive, simple, lighthearted piece. The third one here, it shows you that we do have 3 different media productions. Anyone that can help us, advise us, assist us, that would be great. And the last one is we're establishing a board of advisors. We prefer a full group of young people to seniors to assist us on the overall project. So that is our process that we're doing. We're good?
We're good.
We're good. Thank you.